They did not strike the first blow with a sword. They began with silence. The courtyard was already warm from the morning sun, but the metal in the executioner's hands glowed a different color, orange, then white, then the deep red of restraint abandoned. The woman was dragged forward, her name read aloud not as a person, but as a crime, accused of plotting against the king, accused of thinking treason. In late medieval Europe, that was enough. The crowd leaned in, not because they had never seen death, but because this was not death yet. This was instruction. This was theater. This was what happened to bodies that threatened power. The device descended slowly, almost ceremonially. A long metal tube, heavy, purpose-built. Its mouth split open to reveal teeth, jagged, uneven, bestial. Someone in the crowd whispered the nickname they all knew, Crocodile Shears. When the jaws closed around her limb, the sound was not a scream at first. It was metal meeting bone. The scream came later, after the twist, after the pull, after the realization that this punishment was never meant to be quick. This was not justice. This was a warning written in flesh. Across medieval kingdoms, women accused of conspiracy faced punishments designed not merely to kill, but to erase defiance itself. Their bodies became proof that loyalty was mandatory, silence was survival, and dissent would be dismantled piece by piece. The crocodile shears were not an aberration, they were policy. And tonight, we are opening the archive on a weapon designed to mutilate before mercy, to break not just bones, but memory itself. This is the story of how fear became law, and how power learned to speak through pain.
To understand the crocodile shears, you must first understand the world that forged them. Late medieval Europe was not governed by stability. It was ruled by paranoia. Kings sat on thrones built atop fragile alliances, nobles who plotted constantly, clergy who watched closely, and populations one bad harvest away from rebellion. The crown feared the blade, but it feared the whisper more. Plots did not always involve armies. Some involved letters, confessions, rumors shared in kitchens and corridors. And women were uniquely vulnerable in this environment. They served in courts, managed estates, acted as messengers, arranged marriages, and overheard conversations never meant for the public ear. When power felt threatened, suspicion often fell on those closest to intimate space. A woman accused of conspiring against the king was not simply charged with treason. She was accused of corrupting order itself. And medieval justice had a principle. It believed punishment must mirror the perceived crime. Treason was not just illegal, it was considered a spiritual infection. The body, in medieval thought, was a canvas for moral correction. Pain was not merely retribution, it was purification. To dismember a traitor was to symbolically dismantle rebellion. To display that suffering publicly was to inoculate society through fear. Execution methods reflected this belief. Hanging was for common thieves, beheading was mercy reserved for nobles, but mutilation, that was for those accused of destabilizing the realm. The crocodile shears emerged in this climate as a tool of calculated terror. Its purpose was not efficiency, it was delay. Each movement slow, each reaction visible. The longer the victim endured, the more effective the lesson. Records from court proceedings and punishment accounts describe spectacles lasting far longer than needed to kill. Limbs were targeted not for anatomical necessity, but for symbolism. Arms were removed to represent lost agency, legs to signify the inability to flee justice. Crucially, women accused of treason were often denied even the limited mercies afforded to men. Their suffering was judged as morally corrective, both for them and for those watching. The church sanctioned this reasoning. The crown depended on it. The crowd internalized it. Violence became ritual. Ritual became law. And devices like the crocodile shears were the physical manifestations of a system that believed power could be preserved through spectacle and silence enforced through pain. These tools were not hidden in dungeons. They were kept where everyone could see them, because fear works best when it is familiar. If you believe history's darkest secrets should be remembered, not buried, subscribe to the Crimson Archive.
The crocodile shears were deceptively simple. That simplicity was the point. Unlike elaborate torture racks or clockwork devices, this instrument relied on raw physics: heat, leverage, pressure, and time. It was forged by blacksmiths who understood anatomy not from books, but from war. The core of the device was a long iron or steel shaft, roughly the length of a spear handle. This allowed the executioner distance, emotional and physical, from the victim. At the end of that shaft sat the mouth. Two curved blades, hinged like jaws, lined with teeth. Those teeth were not symmetrical. Some were filed longer, others left jagged. The uneven design ensured that when the jaws closed, pressure would not distribute evenly. One side always bit deeper first. Before use, the entire head of the shears was placed into a brazier. Charcoal burned below. Bellows fed oxygen into the flame. Slowly, deliberately, the metal absorbed heat until it glowed red. This was not incidental cruelty. Heat served multiple functions. First, it cauterized superficially, sealing outer flesh just enough to delay exsanguination while deeper arteries tore. This prolonged consciousness. Second, heat fused metal to skin on contact. When the jaws closed, flesh did not simply compress, it adhered. When the executioner twisted, tissue twisted with it. Third, heat introduced a secondary injury: burn shock. The nervous system was overwhelmed before the limb even began to separate. The executioner did not strike, he clamped. The jaws closed slowly, often pausing halfway. This was intentional. Victims frequently screamed assumptions, confessions, names, prayers before the real agony even began. The device turned anticipation into torture. Then came the rotation. The shaft allowed for torque. With a controlled turn of the wrists, the executioner could rotate the jaws while maintaining pressure. Bone cracked not cleanly, but spiraled. Muscles tore along natural seams. Arteries stretched, then ruptured. If the limb did not fully sever on the first pull, the executioner pulled again and again. Each motion accompanied by a wet sound the crowd learned to recognize. Executions were often staged so the victim remained upright, roped or held, forcing the body to assist its own destruction through weight and gravity. This device was not designed for speed. It was designed for spectacle duration. Medical intervention followed only when death failed to arrive quickly enough, bleeding hastened, or the heart pierced. Mercy was never the objective. Closure was. When the crocodile shears were finally withdrawn, they rarely came away clean. Pieces of the victim came with them. That was part of the display. The mechanism was not just metal. It was an argument made physical. An argument that said, power does not negotiate. Her name appears once in the records, spelled 3 different ways. She was not a general, not a commander, not a knight. She was a lady in waiting. Her crime, according to the charge, was knowledge unbecoming loyalty. A letter intercepted, a conversation overheard, a failure to report suspicion quickly enough. In a court where survival depended on proximity, silence became guilt. She was arrested before dawn. No time to dress properly, no time to argue. By sunrise, she stood in the square. She did not beg at first. That detail appears repeatedly. Witnesses noted it, almost as if restraint offended expectations. The sentence was read slowly so that no word escaped the crowd.
When the tool was revealed, her composure broke, not into screams, but into shaking. The mind could not reconcile what the eyes understood. She asked one question: how many? No one answered. The clamp closed on her leg just above the knee. The first contact burned before it cut. Her body reacted violently, muscles locking, spine arching, as if flight were still possible. Her scream came in stages, first breath, then sound, then language dissolving into repetition. She called her mother's name, then God's. When the executioner twisted, her hands tore at restraints until skin split. Witnesses later described the smell before the sight, a mixture of metal, burned hair, and blood. She fainted, then woke. Cold water was thrown over her face. This was allowed. Consciousness was necessary for legitimacy. By the time the limbs separated, she could no longer form words, only noise, only reflex. The crowd watched longer than required. Some turned away, others did not. The second clamp was announced but never used. She bled out before instruction could continue. Her remains were buried outside consecrated ground, a final punishment. Memory denied sanctuary. And yet, centuries later, we speak of her. Not because the crown intended to immortalize her suffering, but because pain leaves records deeper than ink.
The crocodile shears eventually disappeared from official use, not because morality evolved overnight, but because power learned subtler languages. Public mutilation was replaced with imprisonment. Spectacle shifted from flesh to fear of disappearance. But the logic survived. States learned that terror did not always need blood, just unpredictability, just visibility, just enough precedent to remind the population what resistance costs. The women punished under accusations of treason were rarely proven conspirators. Their real crime was proximity, to influence, to knowledge, to uncontrolled space within rigid hierarchies. Their bodies bore what their society feared. Today, the shears sit behind glass, labeled with dates and neutral terms, judicial instrument, punitive device. But there is nothing neutral about a tool built to dismantle a human being slowly. The legacy of the crocodile shears is not the metal. It is the lesson it attempted to carve into history, that authority is maintained through spectacle, and fear is more durable than loyalty. And the question remains, uncomfortably modern. How many systems today no longer need red-hot iron because they've learned to fracture lives without leaving visible wounds? If this investigation unsettled you, if it made you uncomfortable in the way truth often does, then stay with us. Subscribe to the Crimson Archive because some histories still echo, and silence